of what the Serbs have long said were important interests of self-governance, direct connection for Serbs with Belgrade, and a lot of other provisions. The Ahtisaari Plan is an amazing document because it includes dozens and dozens of obligations on Pristina in its implementation, and almost none on Belgrade. So it was a concerted effort at enticing Belgrade into cooperation on Kosovo. Frankly, it failed, and I'm not surprised it failed. It was conducted foolishly. Putting everything on the table and letting somebody walk off with it before you get a deal is just not a good way to conduct diplomacy. Clearly, the Kosovo issue has continued to boost the nationalists, has led to really quite extraordinary remarks by the Prime Minister of Serbia about the need for prominent American diplomats to shut up, basically, not to be heard from again. Threats of various retaliation, a secret plan. And the prospect of an embargo against Kosovo, including an embargo of electricity supplies, water supplies, that kind of thing. Threatening breaking of diplomatic relations with the United States. And clearly the Prime Minister has taken a position against NATO membership for Serbia, and almost as clearly, but stopping a step short, against membership in the European Union, which makes you wonder why we thought signing or initialing a stabilization association agreement was going to be attractive for Serbia. It's, again, not a great bit of diplomacy. Preševo is a part of southern Serbia that has, parts of it have a large Albanian population. So the question becomes, if the north breaks off from Kosovo because there are Serbs there, won't the Albanians try to take the Preševo area out of Serbia into Kosovo? I think the answer is that there are some Albanians who will want to do that and will try it. I think Belgrade has pretty good control of that area. It's actually been pretty good about integrating that area into Serbia much more than it had been in the past, and very wisely so. And I think that is a relatively minor problem, so long as the North doesn't try to break off. As I said in the opening, I just don't see any purpose in further delay. Delay has only made matters worse on this issue. My bottom line is the quicker, the more decisive, the less ambiguous, the better. And we need to take a decision within weeks, if not days. Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, I'm sure Nicholas agrees with everything, and no, go ahead. It's your turn.
I just wanted to start by recalling one of these resolutions that the Senate passed a few years back regarding a country that had a ethnic insurgency that created a separate entity on its territory. And the Senate acknowledged that the country in question had in fact oppressed this ethnic minority, that it had made mistakes, but that because this country was a democracy, and because the principle of the United States is to encourage territorial integrity of states as its guiding principle, that the U.S. Senate endorsed the principle of maximum autonomy, that this should be the end goal, that whenever you have a state where there's an ethno-territorial group that's the majority, that feels it's been oppressed in the past, that has in fact been oppressed in the past, that seeks to break away, the default position should in fact be to go for autonomy. This is the standard default U.S. position for every frozen conflict in the greater Black Sea region. It is the U.S. position for Sudan. It is the U.S. position for Western Sahara. It is the U.S. position for Aceh in Indonesia, for the southern Philippines, so on and so forth. That generally, when we have two competing rights, and in the opening, very clear. We have two groups claiming the same real estate. We have two principles that are clashing. One is that of self-determination, and the other is territorial integrity of states. The U.S. position has almost always been that we want territorial integrity of the state to be the primary driver of our policy. It's why in a place called Somalia, which has not had a functioning state for more than 15 years, we still don't recognize the two entities which have functioning governments because we still hold to the idea that we should try to hold together the state system. This was the basis, and our topic tonight is the East-West clash over Kosovo. And it's interesting because in 1999 there was not an East-West clash. There was agreement at the Security Council that the way forward was to work for maximum autonomy. Now we can argue there's reasons on the ground, we can say special case, so on and so forth, but the roots of this is that there was a consensus position among all the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, most of the leading powers in the world, including states like South Africa and India, that the way forward was to try to reconcile two competing imperatives, self-determination and territorial integrity, through a plan for autonomy. To the extent that the position of the United States and of some countries in the European Union has changed, countries are free to change their policies, but we should start from the position that we did have a consensus and we've moved away from it. The subject tonight as well, East-West, is an interesting one because I think most people came here thinking, well, this means Russia. What's Russia going to do if you have unilateral declaration of independence? And we can start with the Russian case. And my sense is that if you have UDI in Kosovo tomorrow, not much happens the day after. I think that we're all programmed for day after scenarios that if nothing happens in 48 hours, we all breathe a sigh of relief and say, crisis averted. It's not that, as some people had expected and laid out a scenario that if Kosovo declares independence unilaterally and some states recognize it, then other breakaway states will declare independence and Russia will recognize or not recognize, and then you have a problem in that regard. It's the longer term question about how you deal with reconciling these two competing imperatives of territorial integrity and self-determination. What is the proper framework? And what happens in terms of when two sides can't agree and we have to go to the question of imposing a settlement? And then you see very clearly that there is an East-West divide on this issue, and it's not just Russia. It includes China, it includes India, and other states that are concerned. This does not mean that they oppose the idea of a independent Kosovo eventually emerging, or that they think that the territory must always be connected to Serbia. It's the question of how is this done? What is the timetable? Why is it that it has to be done so rapidly and so quickly when we have a number of frozen conflicts that have had the potential for violence and have stabilized or have found ways to coexist? Why does it have to be done this year? Why did we create artificial deadlines of 120 days, or if something doesn't happen, we have to move to a particular course of action? We locked ourselves in. The European Union has locked itself into an extremely unattractive position because France and Germany, who may want to recognize the independence of Kosovo, also have to decide whether they want a repeat of 2003, which is the principle that when the United States can't get something done in the Security Council, it bypasses the Security Council. France and Germany didn't like that precedent for the Iraq War. The question is are they prepared to accept it for Kosovo and not to see it occur elsewhere? What does this do for the emergence of an international system in the future, which people have described as that of twilight states? What happens if we now have a situation emerging where we become more comfortable with bits of states being broken off and some recognize and others don't recognize?